The movie begins with a group of Mahi warriors having a good time by the fireside. Suddenly they were attacked by the Agojie female warriors. This resulted to a bloody fight, as the warriors slaughtered all the Mahi warriors, liberating their slaves in the process. After they had freed the captives, they took their prisoners as they marched to the Dahomey kingdom. Back at Dahomey kingdom, they are respected and revered as the new king considers them to be his most valuable soldiers. The movie switches to a young maiden called Nyawi. They had brought in a suitor for her, a rich old man, but Nyawi doesn't want to be forced into marriage. When the man noticed that Nyawi wasn't responding to his conversations, he slapped her, saying it was an act of disrespect. This made Nyawi push the suitor away, so he leaves in disgust. Nyawi's frustrated father then brings her to the Agojie, saying no one is ready to marry her and she should work for the king. Nyawi is then taken to the palace, where she sees a lot of female warriors in training. Meanwhile, a group of Oyo warriors led by their general comes across the dead bodies of the Mahi soldiers. They are furious because they were slaughtered by women, so they plan their next attack, which is shutting off the new king of the Dahomey kingdom. Back at the palace, the new king tells his councils that the Oyo has entered their land and broken the peace and it's time to cut off from them. One of his council's member then tells him that the Oyo nation are twice their size with horses and more weapons. He continues by saying the Agojie wouldn't be enough to defeat them. Naniska, the female warrior, then assures the king that they are ready. She chipped in that the Dahomey kingdom have prospered on slave trade, but it is slowly killing them and they needed a new approach. She suggests that they double their harvest and trade palm oils instead of their people. The king, who loved the idea of the palm oil, then requested to know more about the palm oil and its quantity. This left the other council's members disappointed. In the next scene, Naniska addresses the freed prisoners and new recruits. She tells them all about the Dahomey kingdom and what they fight for. She tells them if they join the Agojie, they would be revered and their opinions would be heard. They are not to marry or bear children, as their major responsibility is to protect the Dahomey kingdom. She concludes by saying if anyone doesn't wish to stay, they are free to leave. Few girls decided to leave, but Nyawi stayed back. After the orientation, Agojie introduced herself to Nyawi as they striked up a conversation. She tells Nyawi that the first training of being a warrior is to listen to her commands. She then tells Nyawi to go take her bathe. While she was having her bath, she comes across Naniska. They started a conversation as she introduced herself to the Agojie warrior. She also explained her situation to Naniska. Naniska then tells her that it only takes skills to be a great warrior and not magic. Nyawi, on the other, is a strong-willed person, who believes she can achieve any feat. The next day during training, the girls were given ropes to begin with, but Nyawi felt she needs a stronger weapon. Naniska then gives her a blade to strike a wooden statue. She tried cutting its head but wasn't successful. Naniska then takes the weapon from her as she cut its head with one swing. She then concludes by telling Nyawi to focus on her rope. Later that night, Agojie goes over to meet Nyawi. She tells her that she has to fight smart. She then narrates her tale to Nyawi, and how her parents treated her badly. The next day, Agojie tells the group that they are to face their final test as warriors. Whoever passed will become Agojie, while those who failed will be left out from the group. They began their training as warriors, in which Nyawi impressed as she acted smart. One time she added gunpowder to one of the wooden statues, which caused an explosion when an Agojie warrior struck it. Naniska then summoned the girls. She demanded to know who performed the trick. Nyawi took responsibility for her actions. She then challenged Naniska, saying she did nothing wrong. Naniska then admonishes her, saying she wasn't focused and her arrogance wouldn't take her anywhere. So she dismissed Nyawi. Agojie meets up a sad Nyawi. She takes her out for a conversation. She tells Nyawi that she has to stop challenging Naniska and her tongue will get her kicked out. She continues by saying Naniska may one day be the woman king. King Gezo is a man that honors tradition. Unlike his brother, he treats everyone equal. In the next scene, after Naniska had woken up from a bad dream, Amenza comes over to visit her, noticing that things weren't fine. She inquires to know about Naniska's dream. Naniska then tells her that she sees herself in the jungle with a beast, but doesn't know what exactly the beast looks like. Amenza then used nuts to interpret her dreams. She tells Naniska that she sees someone from her past coming back to her and she should go to the altar. As Naniska goes outside, she sees Nyawi training so hard. The next day, while the people of Dahomey were having a feast, the Oyo warriors arrive with their general, Oba Ade. He confronts King Gezo, saying they needed to pay the tribute to keep the Ueda port open for trade. King Gezo and the general came to an agreement of 20 Agojie warriors. Meanwhile, Naniska was in shock as she recognized Oba Ade to be the man that raped her severely while she was in captivity. After he had left, Naniska rushes over to the altar, where she meets up with Amenza. Naniska tells her that her revelations were true as she recognizes Oba Ade, the Oyo general. The scene switches to the port of Ueda, the center of slave trades. White slavers from Portuguese led by Santo Ferreira arrived at the port. He was accompanied by his friend a half-Dahomeyan, Malik. Santo then showed Malik the slaves and how they were being treated, but Malik wasn't happy with what he saw. Just then the Agojie warriors arrived at the port. They meet up with Oba Ade, they confront him saying they will no longer pay tribute to him as Naniska gives him the head of his warriors and second in command. The Agojie warriors then flees, leaving Naniska to the mercy of the Oyo warriors. They engage in a fierce battle. Luckily enough for her, she was saved by Nyawi. After they had escaped the port, Naniska scolds Nyawi for staying back, saying her foolish decisions and arrogance will end her one day. Nyawi was sad because she had just saved Naniska from death. Amenza walks up to Naniska. She tells her that Naniska is actually the one that deviated from the plan. She should have run back with the Agojie warriors, but she decided to stay back and fight her enemy. In the next scene, Shantae, the king's favorite wife, walks up to Naniska after she had returned from Ueda. She tells Naniska that they should work together to serve the king and make their empire prosperous. But Naniska knows her true intentions was just to sit on the throne next to the king. So she waved her off. Naniska takes King Gezo to the oil plantation. He promises her that they will conquer the Oyo kingdom and then expand their land. He continues by saying he will never sell his own people to the white man and slave trading must stop when he conquers Oyo kingdom. At Ueda, Oba Ade assures Santo that they were still open for business and the Dahomeys can't stop them because the Mahi and Igbo kingdom is in alliance with Oyo. Meanwhile, Malik tells Santo that he needs to go visit Dahomey, as it was his mother's wish before she died. So the two traveled to Dahomey. During the journey, Nyawi comes across Malik in the jungle, while he was taking a bath. At first she was hostile, but when she found out that he wasn't a slaver, the two became friends. Santo and Malik arrived at Dahomey. After greeting the king, he introduces Malik to King Gezo who welcomed him wholeheartedly. He tells them to have a good time as the new Agojie recruits are displaying their final test today. Malik cites Nyawi as one of the recruits. After the final test, Nyawi came out to be the best warrior, as they all celebrated her victory. After the event, Naniska helps Nyawi remove the thorns that were stuck in her body as a result of the brutal test. While Naniska was taking care of Nyawi, she comes across a birth scar. Naniska was taken aback as she leaves the scene. Amenza then go over to meet Naniska who is panicking in her room. It is then revealed that Naniska had a baby back then when she was still a captive, and the scar on Nyawi is very similar to the one she drew on her child back then. Meanwhile, Santo tries to convince King Gezo that if he stops the slave trade he will be nothing and unprotected. King Gezo tells him that they will no longer be a commodity to the white, and Dahomey kingdom are ready to fight for their freedom. Malik goes over to meet Nyawi. He tells her to meet him outside the palm lines at night. Later at night, Agojie warns Nyawi that she shouldn't give her powers to any man. She raised up the topic because she had noticed the way Malik looked at her. She advises her that love makes one weak, and she shouldn't fall a victim. Nyawi goes over to meet Malik. He tells her that the Oyo are planning an attack on Dahomey, and they have invited other tribes to fight alongside them. Nyawi then goes over to report this to Naniska. Naniska wasn't happy that Nyawi was seeing a white man. She reprimands her, explaining how she was captured. She reveals to her that she was impregnated by the Oba and was left with a girl child. She made a scar and implanted a shark tooth in her left shoulder. Then she gave her away. Naniska then cuts out the scar to confirm if the shark tooth was still there. She extracted the tooth, confirming that Nyawi is her biological daughter. This revelation left Nyawi in shock. In the next scene, Naniska prepares her warriors to attack the Oyo warriors, who were already camped waiting to attack the Dahomey Empire. She tells the Agojie warriors that the Oyo warriors were much, which will make them arrogant and slow. Naniska and her warriors then plant explosions all over the camp. She ignites the explosives as it took out majority of the Oyo warriors. This resulted to a bloody battle. When General Oba Ade noticed that he was losing the battle, he quickly tells his men to retreat. They captured the injured Agojie warriors, which includes Nyawi and Agojie. The captured warriors were then taken captive and brought to the port for slave trade. As the Dahomey warriors celebrates their victory, Naniska notices that Nyawi wasn't among the survivors. At Ueda, Nyawi meets up with Agojie who was with a broken arm. She motivates Agojie not to give up hope and she should remain a warrior. One of the captured Agojie warriors escapes through the help of Nyawi, and then goes over to Naniska to report about the capture of Nyawi and the others. In the next scene, King Gezo makes Naniska the woman king, for her victory over the Oyo Empire. This made Shantae leave the palace in anger. Naniska then begs him to allow her go for a rescue mission to save the captured girls, but he refuses to authorize it. Meanwhile, at Uada, Nyawi and the rest of the captured girls were brought out to be sold to the highest bidder. A distraction from Malik then enables the girl to escape, but Agojie is shot in the process. This made Nyawi devastated. Malik then buys her from the slave trade to keep her from harm's way. Naniska on the other hand disobeys the king's command. She goes over to rescue the captured girls with Amenza and some other warriors. The next morning Shantae informs the king of Naniska's disobedience. This made King Gezo furious. Naniska arrives at the port. She frees all the prisoners as they engage themselves in battle. In the midst of the chaos, Malik frees some prisoners as they gathered together to drown Santo. Nyawi rejoins Naniska in battle. She defeats Oba Ade in a bloody fight. As they returned back to Dahomey triumphantly, where the king had already prepared a feast to crown Shantae the new woman king. Upon seeing Naniska return with the captives, he reprimands her for disobeying his orders. She tells him that she was ready to resign, but instead he proclaims her the woman king. This left Shantae heartbroken. The people of Dahomey then celebrates their victory and freedom. After the festival, Naniska reunites with her long-lost daughter Nyawi. The end. If you love this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye till we meet again.